On this episode of the Kevin Widdop Show, I speak to Australian entrepreneur Chris Hood about his journey from 8-year-old businessman to starting and scaling a successful handmade jewellery business in Tasmania. Can you describe where your passion for creating jewellery came from?
I think it was just a flow on from a childhood with a workshop. So the house I lived in had a really nice tool workshop. My father did tinker a bit. He was a winemaker. And then when the family did eventually move to Tasmania, which was his family home, the workshop grew, and my favourite subjects at school were metalwork and woodwork, and it just progressed from there. The gemstones that were there the whole time though. Yeah. I was picking up stones as soon as I was walking.
Wow.
So I've literally still got the little quartz cluster that I picked up on a hill near my dad's work. And I would have been 6 or 7, something like that. Yeah. And it wasn't until you look back and you see, oh, I was always interested in that.
What was it about gemstones that grabbed you?
For me, they're just so obviously valuable.
Yeah.
I don't believe in crystal healing or anything like that, but anyone who reads about gemstones and their formation realises just how magical and rare and unusual they are. We've got a huge planet here, and a tiny percentage of it is perfectly crystallised material.
In 1990, the family moved to Tasmania to develop the winemaking business Hood Wines. What lessons in startup entrepreneurialism did you learn from your family?
Yeah, absolutely. It was an interesting business in that Dad had been a university lecturer in wine science for a number of years, and it wasn't until I think in his mid-40s that he went into business on his own, which is extremely unusual. Most entrepreneurs become visible much earlier, and so I don't really think he was. I think he was a very cautious businessman, and extremely good at what he did.
Early 40s, did you say?
Early to mid-40s he started. Yeah, he's already a very knowledgeable and good winemaker by that point. So I think the normal path for an entrepreneur is a few early attempts, and ideally a few early failures, because you learn a lot from failures. I didn't see my dad fail.
Really?
No. And I've probably been more cautious as an entrepreneur myself than I probably should have been. Mm-hmm. I could have been more successful earlier had I taken greater risks, but I don't come from a risk-taking background. I come from a calculated investment background. So
very, very interesting.
Failure is probably the wrong word.
The hard knocks of entrepreneurship, perhaps.
Yeah, I think they're actually part of the fire that forges someone who becomes magnificent at this kind of thing. Your Richard Bransons and a dozen other guys, they all had significant failures, incorrect business partnerships, all sorts of stuff, learning experiences. I'd look at that as just paying for an education. Some people go to uni and pay tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars for that. Entrepreneurs normally go out on it early, often without an education, and fail a few times, pay for their education that way, and then work it out.
When did your entrepreneurial journey start?
I think it probably started for me at about 8 or 9. I'd be on summer holidays. Mum might have been at home, Dad was definitely at work. I'd mow the lawn. Mum had suddenly realised that I wasn't mowing the lawn anymore because I was up the street mowing the neighbour's lawn because they were paying me. So I worked out I could get $10 mowing a lawn up the road, and I could mow 5 or 6 lawns in a day. $50 for a 10-year-old in rural New South Wales was an awful lot of money. So I had that kind of mentality. I came from a middle income kind of family, middle class, so money was an issue. I think money's an issue for everyone, but that developed a mentality for me. I find it difficult to walk past a 5-cent coin or a small coin in any country that's sitting on the ground, and I pick it up because it means something to me, and it reinforces a mindset that you watch the pennies and the pounds take care of themselves. So you've got to have that. Entrepreneurs that make it big and then blow it all, it's
not sustainable.
It's not great. No.
It's not great.
So I think the guys that make it long term probably have a little bit more of a rich dad, poor dad, I don't know, Robert Kiyosaki kind of approach, which is, make money and make some of it stick.
Mentorship is often said to be critical in business. Did you have a mentor?
Absolutely. I had two. I had, in fact, I had a lot of my dad's friends, for one or other reason, have been really instrumental in forming me mentally. In the jewellery trade, I've had two major mentors, Gary Holloway and John Colesia. I'd say Gary was my business smarts and how to run a jewellery business kind of mentor, and John Colegia was the emotional beauty sells. He did business on a gut. He'd buy a stone because he liked it,
right.
And if he liked it, he knew he could sell it. Whereas Gary would look at what was selling and stock the shop with that so that we could repeat sell. Both viable models, very, very different though. Yeah, and they both ran workshops very, very differently. So I took the good things from both and, as far as possible, eliminate the bad things from both from my business. So I try and make my workshops a pleasure to be in, to attract the best craftsmen. These weren't formal mentors.
Right.
These were me taking everything I could from a guy that was successful,
right.
Whether he liked me doing it or not.
Right.
And while I was doing it, they were also getting a good deal, I like to think, as well, because I was working very hard for them and testing my skills in their businesses. Active mentoring, I'm a fan of that.
Yeah.
I'll talk to anyone about business. Sure. I won't hide anything, even someone in the same business. I always find that comes back in spades in a good way. Mm-hmm. So I'm not, in spades is probably the wrong term. It always comes back in a good way.
Yeah, reciprocity, isn't it?
Yep. I believe in, I don't believe in crystal healing, but I do believe that if you put good energy out, you get good energy back. And I think it's really just about positive thinking. Your perception changes if you're positive.
Yeah.
So a very important part of being an entrepreneur, because there will be tough times, is mindset. So really simple things like, are you eating right? Are you drinking enough water? When you're flat and you can't make decisions clearly, you're not going to be effective. So you don't go out and get boozed up. Yeah. Instead, you go for a run and have an early night. Sure. So there's a fair amount of, in my experience, there's a fair amount of life maintenance and what's the word? Delaying gratification. Mm. I'd love to go out with my mates on a Friday night, but I've got to work Saturday, and Saturday's my biggest day. Yeah. So I make that sacrifice.
Entrepreneurialism is such an up and down journey. Can you tell us about a time when you considered giving up?
Most of my really down moments have been surrounding a staffing issue that isn't working out. I've been fired once myself, and I've let a couple of people go one way or the other. So I've been on both sides. That's really, really tough stuff. It's impossible not to take that kind of thing personally. So there's a lot of weight. Making sure your staff are happy and healthy and the workplace is safe, that's a really big thing for me. If something was to happen to someone while they were helping me get wealthy or run a business, that'd be, I think that'd probably be about as worst case scenario I could get. That'd be far worse than losing a business.
Sure. Absolutely.
So you've got a lot of responsibility if you're going to start taking on staff, which is the end game. Any person who wants to get big on their own is only going to go so far. You've got to, in my mind, you're trying to build something that then functions without you, frees you up to then use all of those skills and then take them over onto something else.
So what takeaways can we learn from my interview with Chris today? Number one, there's often an element of risk associated with entrepreneurialism, but as Chris says, cautious investments can spark big returns. Number two, there's a stigma around failure and entrepreneurialism, but as he says, the Richard Bransons of this world have all failed and failed again before, so don't let it be a full stop for you. And finally, putting good energy out into the world can spark big returns, and that's what this show is all about. Hopefully producing good content, interviews with entrepreneurs who have seen it and done it and got the t-shirt, and unlocking and deconstructing the methodologies behind their success. Thanks very much and see you next time. Who would you like to see on the show? Contact me on Twitter at KevinWiddopia, KWIDDOPIA. Who would you like to see on the show, and what question would you ask them? Thanks very much.